Vanakkam. Hello friends. As we continue looking into the history of the early Pandiyas, in the previous episode we saw about the most famous among them, Thalayalanganathu Seruvendra Pandiyan Nedunchezhiyan. In the next generation, K.N. Sivarajapillai shows two contemporary kings who ruled between 125 to 150 Common Era. How either of them were related to their predecessor Nedunchezhiyan III is left in ambiguity, and we have a set of Sangam poems on both these rulers through which we gather information about their role. Ilavandigai Palli Tunjiya Nanmaran, Nanmaran being the good Maran, who passed away at a place called Ilavandigai, and Kudaharathu Tunjiya Maran Vazhuthi, Maran Vazhuthi, who passed away at Kudaharam. These were the two kings. And we have seen how other contemporary historians like Neelakanta Sastri do not necessarily adhere to the genealogy given by Sivarajapillai, and how in his book The Pandyas, brought out in 1929, Neelakanta Sastri gives a very cursory treatment to all of the early Pandyas. V. Kanahasabai Pillai, in his book titled The Tamils 1800 Years Ago, published in 1904, almost 3 decades before the work of KNS came out, gives his own order in which, adding to the confusion, he brings in certain non-historic personages and includes them in the line of the early rulers. As clearly indicated by his title, he starts from the 1st century Common Era and gives the first king as Arya Padai Kadanda Pandiyan Nedunchezhiyan, who is actually the king who finds a place in the Silappathiharam, and Kanahasabai Pillai goes on to narrate the story of Silappathiharam. Though we will not go into it in detail here, we are of course familiar with the climax where the Pandiyan king Nedunchezhiyan, upon learning that he rendered injustice, albeit unknowingly, to the heroine Kannagi by sentencing to death her innocent husband Kovalan, swooned from the throne and fell and died. Well, given that both Silappathiharam and Manimekalai are stories, KNS repeatedly warns of misreading history into these works. And as if to add further to the confusion, there was a ruler by the name Arya Padai Kadanda Nedunchezhiyan, and how do we know that? He has sung a single poem in the entire Sangam corpus, a rather famous Purananuru poem 335 that has the colophon title Kattral Nandre. The colophons attached to the Puram poems were annexed much later by the compilers, and every colophon carries a suitable title to the poem as well as the name of the author. We will see this poem simply to appreciate the beauty of thought, driving home the importance of an education 2 millennia ago by a Pandya ruler who, as his name suggests, probably put down an Aryan army under the Tine, that is the discipline Poduviyal, meaning a general subject. It comes under a beautiful Thurai, a subdivision known as Porunmozhi Kanji, that explores matters that elevate the soul, the Uyir. And the poem begins, உற்றுழி உதவியும் உருபொருள் கொடுத்தும் பிட்டை நிலை முனியாது கற்றல் நன்றே. It is good to learn from a teacher, giving him due respect, helping him during troubled times, providing him substantial wealth and learning without malice at heart. பிறப்போர் அன்ன உடன் வயிற்றுள்ளும் சிறப்பின் பாலால் தாயும் மனம் திரியும். To those born in the same womb, the mother will feel tenderness towards the one who is more learned. ஒருகுடி பிறந்த பல்லோருள்ளும் மூத்தோன் வருக என்னாது அவருள் அறிவுடையோன் ஆறு அரசும் செல்லும். Amidst those belonging to the same clan, even the king would reach out to the one who was learned for advice and not necessarily to the one who was eldest by age. வேற்றுமை தெரிந்த நாற்பால் உள்ளும் கீழ்ப்பால் ஒருவன் கற்பின் மேல்பால் ஒருவனும் அவன் கண் படுமே. Among the 4 clans in society, if a man from a lower clan were learned, then a man from an upper group would come to him with reverence. This is the only poem written by this king, and he was rendering for posterity the importance of a good education and how it was accessible to everyone in a society, with no one clan being superior to the other. Whether this king inspired Ilango Adigal through these beautiful verses to create a fictional namesake in the Silappadigaram, we can only guess. The interpretation of commentators who came later of the line Vettumai Therinda Narpal Ullum gives just the opposite meaning of what the poet himself implied. Avai Duraisamy Pillai, the learned scholar of the early 20th century, in giving the meaning for these verses, simply follows the meaning given by commentators who came much earlier during the medieval period between the 10th and 15th century Common Era, who at that time interpreted the verses based on the belief systems that were prevalent and dominant in their society. Thus, Vettumai Therinda Narpal Ullum is explained by Avai Duraisamy Pillai as being the 4 divisions of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, that is the warrior class, the Vaishyas, the trading class, and the Sudras, the working class. A division that was not found in ancient Tamil society and was as per Aryan traditions. Whereas more recent scholars claim that such class divisions did not exist during the Sangam age. And for instance, Vaidehi Herbert, whose English translations of the Sangam poem I have quoted here extensively, opines that the verse Vettumai Therinda Narpal Ullum refer to the different clans in a society that were formed based on the occupation of the people, such as the weavers, the potters, and the farmers. She says that there is no mention of a caste system or any related issues in the Sangam works, and quotes a poem by Mangudi Kirar himself as proof. Purananuru poem 335, where a few parts of it are missing, begins Adalarum Tuppin Kurave Talave Kurande Mullai Endru. It goes to show that there are only 4 flowers, the Kuravam, Thalavam, Kurundam and Mullai, and only 4 foods, Varagu, Tinai, Kollu, that is the horse gram, and the Avarai beans. These are all very ancient foods of the Tamils. And the poet continues, Tudiyan Panan Parayan Kadamban Endru Innan Galladu Kudiyum Illai. Here, the poet mentions that there were no groups or classification of people other than these 4, where Tudiyar were the drummers, the Panar were the bards, who were not just minstrels but also advisors in the king's court. Parayar, the player of the Parai drum, was more of a messenger in those days, as we today relate to the meaning of the term Parai, that means to speak. In Malayalam, quite a few relics of ancient Tamilagam still preserved in Chera country, and Kadamban referred to the priests who wore the Kadamba Male and did the Veriyadal, appropriating the deities like the Murugu and Kottravai. And the poem here continues, Onna Tevvar Munninru Vilangi, ஒளிர ஏந்து மறுப்பின் களிறு எரிந்து வீழ்ந்தன கல்லே பரவின் அல்லது நெல் உகுத்து பரவும் கடவுளும் இல்லை. There are no gods other than those who are worshipped in the memorial stones, the nadukal, of fallen heroes who blocked enemies, killing their elephants and dying a brave death, being worshipped by offerings of rice. This seemed to be a period of rapid cultural assimilation thanks to the influence of incoming forces from the north, as clarified further in some of the verses from Maruthanar's Madurai Kanji that we saw briefly in the previous episode. In the following lines that describe a horrific war scene, for instance, Pinangkota Kalittu Kulambin Ninamvai Peida Pei Mahalir Inai Oli Imil Tunangai Sir Pinayubam Elundada. These verses describe a battle scene wherein lie dead elephants on whose tusks are found pierced the bodies of dead soldiers, and the female ghouls visit the battlefield and dance the Tunangai dance, and listening to the beat, the headless bodies of fallen soldiers get up and dance as well. Here, the term Pinayubam, that meant the body of a dead warrior, was interpreted to mean the Yubastambam, the sacrificial post which is part of Vedic tradition by late commentators. And the poem continues, Anju vanda porkalathan aan thalai anangadupin. In the frightening battlefield, with the heads of fallen heroes being used as legs for a stove, a big pot is put and the flesh of the fallen soldiers is cooked in their own blood, and the severed limb of a hero is used as a ladle to cook this, and this is offered to those dead soldiers who fought bravely without retreating in the battlefield and gave up their lives for their king. Adi odingi pinpeyara padayorku murugu ayara. This clearly shows a Kala Velvi which was part of ancient Tamil tradition. But again, interpreters who came later read the term Velvi to mean the Vedic fire sacrifice, and even the historian Nilakanta Sastri remarks how Nedunjeliyan III followed Brahminical religion. The poem continues further, Amar Kadakkum Viyanthane தென்னவன் பெயரிய துன்னருந்துப்பின் தொல்முது கடவுள் பின்னர் மேய வரைத்தாள் அருவி பொறுப்பின் பொருண. Here, Tennavan simply meant the ruler of the south, here Pandian Nedunjeliyan, and he represented an ancient clan, and the Tolmudu Kadavul mentioned here was a nameless ancient god. Now, commentators like Nachinar Kiniyar read the meaning of Tennavan as Lord Yama, Kootravan himself, while some of the late commentators made Tolmudu Kadavul into Lord Shiva, hence making the Pandyas come from the lineage of Lord Shiva himself. Thus, history stood corrupted by the interpretation of these commentators. The strength of the incoming influences on the ideologies of the Tamil country can be traced through many a Sangam poem and its later interpretations such as this, and probably that is why Mangudiyar had to clarify that there was no other worship prevalent at that time in Tamil society other than that of the ancestors, a practice that continues to this day in Tamil country as Kuladeiva Vadipadu that remains as strong as ever. Now, coming to the next generation Pandya king Ilavandigai Palli Tunjiya Nanmaran, 5 poets have sung a poem each in the Sangam corpus in praise of this ruler. And not only do they praise his generosity and valor, but a common thread running through almost all these poems is comparing him to various gods of the Hindu pantheon. Interestingly, 2 Puram poems sung by Vadama Vannakannan Peri Chatanar and Avur Moolankilar come under a Thurai, a subdivision called Parisil Kadanilai, where a poet, after rendering a praise poem, had to stand and wait at the gates of the king's palace to receive his gifts from the king. The poet Marutham Ilannaganar sings in Purananuru song 55, Vongu Malai Peruvil Pambu Nyan Koliyi ஒரு கனை கொண்டு மூவையில் உடற்றி பெருவிரல் அமரர்க்கு வெற்றி தந்த கரைமிடற்று அண்ணல் காமர் சென்னி பிறைநுதல் விளங்கும் ஒரு கண் போல வேந்து மேம்பட்ட பூந்தார் மார்ப. O Mara, donning a neem garland, you are like the god with a blue throat, a glowing eye, and a crescent moon on his head, who used a soaring mountain as the bow and a snake as the string, and with one arrow ruined all the 3 fortresses in the skies, bringing victory to the celestials. You are superior to all other kings. So these lines give a complete description of Lord Shiva as we know today through the many Puranic stories. All of these seem to have been assimilated into the Tamil belief system at the turn of the Common Era. And the poem continues, though you own an army with 4 divisions, what actually speaks of your greatness is your righteousness. Araneri mudatre arasin kotram. Adanal namarena kol kodadu, pirarena gunam kolladu. Therefore, to save this righteousness, you should rule without partiality. ஞாயிற்றன்ன வெந்திரல் ஆண்மையும் திங்களன்ன தன்பெரும் சாயலும் வானத்தன்ன வன்மையும் மூன்றும் உடையாகி இல்லோர் கையற நீ நீடு வாழிய நெடுந்தகை. You must be brave and manly like the sun, with coolness and tenderness like the moon, and charitable like the sky. May you live a long life. வெண்தலை புணரி அலைக்கும் செந்தில் நெடுவேள் நிலைய காமர் வியன்துறை கடுவழி துகப்ப ஈண்டிய வடு ஆழியக்கர் மணலிலும் பலவே. May you live as long as the grains of sands found on the seashores of Sendil. So, a very early reference to the Lord at Tiruchendur. Purananuru 56 is sung by Madurai Kanakainar Mahan Nakiranar, and the poem begins, Yetu Valan Uyariya Yerimarul Avirsadai. Shiva with the victory flag and a bull, flame like bright matted braids, an axe that is hard to avoid with a blue colored throat. Balarama, the color of the conch shell born of the sea that is white, holding a killing plough and a palm flag in his hand. Thirumal with a beautiful body like the pure sapphire with an eagle flag. Muruga with a victorious rooster flag, a spear and a peacock as his vehicle. Tol Nallise Nalvarullum. Among these four gods, you are like Shiva in anger, Balarama in strength, Thirumal in fame, and Murugan in finishing what you begin. So, Nakirar comes in this generation, and by this time the deities of the 5 landscapes that are described in the Tolgapiyam get integrated with these Vedic traits assigned to them by the Brahminic priesthood. For example, the Muruga deity, who was nothing more than a tree spirit in nature in the Kurunji landscapes, gets a makeover and is given a rooster flag, a victorious spear, that is the veil, and has a peacock as his vehicle. Again, in Purananuru poem 57, sung by Kaviri Poombattinathu Kari Kannanar, Vallar Ayinum Vallunarayinum புகழ்தல் உற்றோர்க்கு மாயோன் அன்ன உரைசால் சிறப்பின் புகழ்சால் மாற. O King Mara of great fame, in giving gifts to those who come to you, irrespective of whether they have talent or not, you are like the great Lord Thirumal. So, other than mentioning the bravery of the king and the ruinations that he brought upon the lands that he invaded, the common feature in all these contemporary poems seems to be that of comparing the king with various gods, something uncommon in the poetry before this era. The other contemporary king is Kudaharathu Tunjiya Maran Vazhuthi, who died at Kudaharam, and he is shown as a contemporary of Kulamuttathu Tunjiya Killi Valavan, the Chola king. And he has 2 poems in his praise, a beautiful one sung by Ayyur Mudavanar that forms Purananuru 51, Neer Mihin Sirayumillai, Thee Mihin Mannuyir Nidattum Nidalumillai. When water overflows, there is no dam to contain it. When fire exceeds, there is no shade to protect the living. When there is too much wind, no strength can resist it. O Vazhuthi, radiant and fierce in battle, you are like these elements. Tan Tamil Podu Yena Pora and Por Edirndu, goes the line, you will not tolerate any claim over the Tamil land and will try to defend and protect it and have it for yourself. Maran Vazhuthi is also sung by Marutham Ilannaganar in the Purananuru poem 52 that begins, Anangudai Nedungottu Alayagam Munayi. A male tiger in a cave on a terrifying tall peak, hating to stay in, rises and stretches full of strength, and goaded by the desire for meat, takes whatever direction he may wish. You are like him with your intent to kill. Vada Pula Mannar Vada, goes a line here that shows that Vazhuthi was eager to go and defeat the kings of the north. So, Marutham Ilannaganar records the king attempting to tame aggressors from the north of Tamilagam. Iniye Kalihelu Kadavul Kandam Kaivada Paligan Mariya Palpadu Podiyil Kaadagi Viliyum Nadudayore. Because of you, once prosperous towns lie in ruins, and even the gods seem to have abandoned their pillars. Marutham Ilannaganar comes across as a common link poet, having sung both the contemporary Ilavandigai Palli Tunjiya Nanmaran and Kudaharathu Tunjiya Maran Vazhuthi. KNS considers Marutham Ilannaganar to be the son of Mangudi Maruthanar. We will continue with our exploration of the early Pandyas in the next episode. Vanakkam.